Our research proposal is as follows. Water tank as catalyst, creating wet spaces as community gathering nodes to establish a sense of place within the context of Plastic View. The Max Neef Needs Assessment acts as a point of departure for our community action plan. The overarching concept of improving service structures within Plastic View serves as a catalyst intervention, where we will address the need for protection, participation, and affection within the community. When collecting data from the settlement, we noted main issues such as open fires, black water in the streets, and the importance of the water tanks. These main issues informed our spatial interventions as catalyst projects. Projects such as communal cooking space, walkways, and localizing sanitation arose during our research methodology. Along with the data we collected from the site, we identified private and public stakeholders who could assist in this process. The following diagram represents our ideas of communicating and approaching the community, while framing our interventions integrated with the existing water tanks in Plastic View. Permanence versus temporality. The idea of temporality is established by regulatory aspects prohibiting the permanence of Plastic View within its existing framework. The land is owned by the government and is set out for development that is planned to happen in the near future. The government forbids permanent structures. Our interventions are built on the idea of temporality and intend to create a device and spatial node which is easily adaptable, interchangeable, and easily disassembled to relate to its context of Plastic View. Water tanks become a point of ritual. Water is used as a celebratory splash of life. The women and children celebrate life through splashing water on the birthday person throughout the day. The water tanks acts as a political node during the election seasons, as the different political parties use the water tanks as a communication platform. The water tanks bring lightness to the community by being a playscape for young children. Through observation, we can see that the children are drawn to the water tanks as it is a central meeting point. The water tanks acts as a beacon of life. Visiting the tanks are an integral part of the citizens' daily routine. Water is core to living and therefore carries so much significance in the community. We visited Plastic View on the 30th of March to collect qualitative data analyzing the typological layout of the water tanks and surroundings. Drawings of floor plans, sections, vignettes, photography, and videography were used to capture the data. We did not interact with the community. The data we captured on site was qualitative in essence, but in the way in which we processed and analyzed the data, we based it on quantitative principles. The mapping will inform our discussions with the water tank leaders. Our ever-changing research findings are thus hybrid in nature due to the complexity of the fieldwork and the sensitivity of the local context. The adjacent map depicts the route we walked through the community when mapping these important daily water nodes. Each tank has its own unique spirits to place resonating around it. Some were hostile, while others were light-hearted, with children playing around the water tank. The community was overall very welcoming but did not really interact with us spontaneously. Some tanks were damaged, and we later discovered it was as a result of the community having to clean the tank regularly by tipping it on its side to be able to get inside the tank. Throughout the learnings of Nabil Hamdi, we identified the primary constraints within the community of Plastic View. These constraints manifest through the lack of services integrated throughout the community. These impeding circumstances stand in the way of change, community engagement, health, and the livelihoods of the citizens residing there. The concept of a catalyst project as a spatial intervention, focusing on providing a service framework to the community, emerged. We investigated only a few indicators to allow for fewer concentrated outputs. We applied a research methodology by making use of qualitative data collection at each tank. We located 12 tanks and noted that 3 tanks were added from previous mapping. The observations of different activities around the tank informed our co-design process. We concluded that designing alongside the community members was the most effective way to inform our intervention. This resulted in the water tank leaders acting as our main informants for our short, medium, and long-term interventions. The potty project contributes to our needs assessment conclusions. The implementation of the private toilets contributes to the community's needs by creating a healthy sanitation service that becomes a safe and dignified place for the citizens. Underground sanitation service pipelines solve the danger of black water in the public streets. This intervention also activates the stakeholders' involvement with the implementation. The wash-up facility in Zulicha. The community works with the design team and contributes to the design intervention. The community involvement in the design process ensures that their needs are met as far as possible. The introduction of management that facilitates maintenance encourages the community of ownership and of the program. The installation of the dry toilet system minimizes the health risks of the immediate environment. The multi-purpose facility increases the communal social space. Europe Water Point upgrade in Gugulethu, Cape Town by Yes and Design. It's a multifunctional infrastructure that creates a setting of protection as it provides the community with basic services and encourages activated streetscapes and spaces that encourages interaction. Through the addition of pedestrian routes and stormwater channels, the routes become a gathering space for interaction. Achieving the goal of having a tap point ratio 23:1 almost halves the amount of people using one tap, therefore more water security per person. On 29 March 2022, Marie went to the community meeting to identify the water tank leaders of Plastic View. These people would then form part of the pool for the co-design workshop. We identified 8 water tanks containing water when meeting with our co-design workshop attendees and decided to focus on them with the help of the community. Selena and Gladys attended our workshop and shared valuable insight of their daily routines regarding the water tanks. Our co-design methodology. We created floor plans from the drone footage that we then printed for the workshop. We created a key for elements and spatial interventions that were identified in iteration 1. From this, we created stickers that correlated with the key. This gave the community the opportunity to stick the stickers on the floor plans where they saw fit and contribute to the layout and the design of the intervention. We concluded to have ablutions near the water tank for hygiene purposes. Seating facilities should not construct mobility of the intersections at the water tanks. Working surfaces should be next to the basins for physical comfort when washing clothing. Raising the plinth of the water tanks will add to the accessibility of collecting water. Allocating more trees will create more social spaces. Light becomes a symbol of safety within the community at night. The location of each tank is accepted by the community and will serve as a catalyst for our short-term interventions. We concluded that water is more than a service. It becomes a ritual and forms part of leisure, as well as a place for political activity. It becomes an interactive node where children play in appropriate space. Certain concerns were also prominent, like the black water surrounding the tanks, which is toxic, and the difficulty of cleaning the tanks. The leaders also raised the issue regarding the inconsistency of the filling of the tanks and noted that they would ideally like to collect water twice a day. The following is a narrative written after our workshop collaboration with the community, showing that the water is more than just water and that water becomes a ritual in Plastic View. The unpredictability due to many social and political factors played a role in the outcome of our interviews, seeing that it changed our information pool. We set out to interview 2 community members, but only had the opportunity to talk with one, Selena, and the community member, Gladys. The methods used in our workshop were only successful to a certain extent. Our workshop lacked visual connections to locality and place. Explaining our interventions to the leaders would have helped them to understand the workshop better. We also only co-designed 6 of the 8 water tank layouts with the leaders, but was valuable enough because we were more interested in the casual conversations we had with the leaders in between the workshop. Designing from the ground up. We proposed several interventions which can be implemented now as catalysts for the wet node. Elements such as paving interventions and water troughs around the tanks to help with the erosion around the tank. This will contribute to reducing the toxic black water surrounding the tanks. Raising the water tanks for ease of use for those community members collecting water for their families daily. Creating a fire pit recessed into the floor plane to act as a communal kitchen area to reduce risk of a fire outbreak inside the dwellings. This can also act as a catalyst for economic activity, as the community can appropriate the space to sell prepared food. Specific black water waste points are allocated to empty black water buckets. Overhead structures acting as shelter, defining a communal space around the individual tanks, will act as rainwater catchment systems. The water collected from these overhead planes will then be used in the wash basins. And lastly, chemical toilets can be installed to function independently from any municipal water supply. Our design approach. By choosing 3 different typologies, we can address the spatial layouts of the wet space interventions we aim to integrate with the community. These 3 interventions systemically integrate with any of the 13 water tanks, applying our spatial interventions with the community's feedback in mind. When considering short-term interventions, we suggest a multi-use wet space surrounding the water tanks to act as a placemaker for the community. Shade, water, sanitation, proper drainage, and leisure spaces are all present in each wet space node. Our suggested intervention is easy to disassemble and is seen as temporary. The first phase of this intervention is a surface covering, raising the tanks, and allocating water dumping areas. Medium-term interventions will include the entire node, with all its components actively working and integrated with the community. The community members can then also appropriate these spaces as they please. One of the biggest implications currently, through the eyes of the community, is the unpredictability of water supply. During our interview with 2 water tank leaders, they raised their opinions about the troublesome water tank drivers who don't consistently deliver their services. Long-term interventions will be the extension of the existing identified municipal water line to all existing wet nodes to allow for a constant flow of water to the community. Tank 1, focusing on safety. The intervention at Tank 1 is based on the safety and vulnerability of the community members at night, seeing that it is located next to the main light source in Plastic View. We intend to move the tap from the streetscape to an area less pedestrian heavy. This will allow us to create a waiting space for those collecting water. The overhead structure can be transparent in materiality to allow the artificial light into the sheltered space at night. The idea of temporality is still evident in the materials used to create this wet space node, relating back to the essence of the built framework of Plastic View. Tank 7, the plaza. The tank allows us to connect all edges of the existing intersection in Plastic View. By placing our intervention in this way, a plaza typology is created. This threshold is used by pedestrians as well as vehicles, and by creating allocated gathering spaces surrounding the intersection, safety and order is addressed. Tank 9, the pedestrian tank. This tank is situated on a pedestrian path, which allows our intervention to spill into the streetscape and existing courtyard typology. The water tank will stay in its original location. An existing fireplace will be used as part of our intervention next to the tank to create a communal cooking area. An overhead structure will span from the water tank tap to the proposed fire pit to create shelter. The chemical toilet enclosure creates a threshold to allow for an intimate courtyard space just off the main street. Consolidating our findings. Our time spent in Plastic View has allowed us as designers to synthesize the intrinsic need of the community into an immediate catalyst project, which will allow the intervention to grow and expand over time. We consider the idea of temporality and relate our design process and catalyst project back to this undeniable essence of Plastic View. This settlement is temporary, but exhibits patterns and elements intrinsic to temporality, a community wanting to be permanent. A spatial node which can be appropriated and adapted by the community to become their own. A structure which can encompass the sense of placemaking and being.